Yeah, I am Kayla McWayne. I live in Wyoming with my two kids and my husband, and I am the genetics navigator for the state of Wyoming through Mountain States Regional Genetics Network.
Tell us about your genetics journey.
We have two kids. We started our family in 2018 when our first son Remington was born. So he's now 4 years old. He was born completely healthy. Nothing was wrong. We went home. We didn't even do the genetic testing that is recommended during pregnancy. We kind of skipped over that and said, if something comes up on ultrasound, we'll address it then. But, also ultimately genetic testing wasn't going to change anything for us. And so we thought, getting past genetic testing, getting past ultrasounds, everything's going to be great. Our 4-year-old was born healthy. And then in 2020, we welcomed my son Braxton, who again was born completely healthy. We did not do genetic testing for him while I was pregnant. And we had multiple ultrasounds with him for different kind of concerns, but ultimately everything came out well. He was born completely healthy. We were discharged from the hospital after 2 or 3 days. And after the newborn screening was completed. And we were home maybe 24 hours before we got a call that said that his newborn screening was abnormal. And it's important to remember that genetic testing that you have while pregnant doesn't include disorders necessarily that are screened on newborn screening. They do test for some genetic disorders that are very serious and very important, but they do not test for PKU. So there would be no way to know that he had PKU before he was born. So as I was saying, his newborn screening came back positive for PKU at 4 days old. And because I did have to have a C-section, we had only been home for maybe 24 hours. We got the call from the pediatrician's office, the on-call pediatrician's office, and they said, the newborn screen came back abnormal. A lot of times we have false positives. He is positive for PKU, and his thyroid levels were also elevated. So we went back in and had more blood drawn. That was a Friday, and we waited all weekend for further results. And we didn't get much guidance from that on-call physician either. They didn't know really what PKU was. They didn't know how to help us, support us, connect us to anything other than a lab to just go repeat our labs and wait. Those labs came back that following Monday, and his thyroid test came back normal. But his PKU test was still positive and his blood levels were still climbing. So that was a Monday, and I think it was Wednesday at 5 o'clock in the morning. We were on our way to Denver Children's Hospital to initiate treatment for PKU in the middle of a snowstorm. And I'm about 9 days post-op at this point. So that's kind of where our genetics journey has started.
Can you tell everybody what PKU is?
PKU is a rare inherited metabolic disorder. We both have to carry the PKU gene to pass this on. And every time we have a child, we have a 1 in 4 chance of them having PKU. And that's similar to say like cystic fibrosis, a 1 in 4 chance every time you have a child. But basically PKU is a metabolic disorder that his body does not properly break down protein or one amino acid in protein. So to treat that, he must maintain a low protein diet for life. That includes low protein medical foods and metabolic formula. It is the only proven effective treatment for all patients living with PKU. However, there are some medications on the market that just increase your tolerance of protein. Obviously, protein is essential to development and growth. So he gets all of the amino acids and protein that he can break down from his metabolic formula. And then we rely on low protein medical foods specifically designed for the treatment of metabolic disorders so that he can get a rounded nutritional diet. Otherwise, he's limited to fruits and vegetables from the grocery store and very few other high sugar items.
Great, thank you. And then I just this caveat. So you live in Wyoming, but you had to drive in a snowstorm to Denver, Colorado.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. So, and the funny thing about Wyoming, I'm not from Wyoming, but the funny thing is they just like put down a sign and close the roads. There's no way in, there's nowhere out. Just go back where you came from. And so the fact that there was a snowstorm that could ultimately halt our ability to get to treatment was really scary. So I was super glad we made it. But in Wyoming, since we are so rural, we lack a lot of resources and physicians and specialties within the state. So a lot of complex medical children have to leave the state. In fact, most of them do, and they either go to Denver, they go to Salt Lake, or they go to Billings. We don't have a choice. We must leave the state, and that's a 4-hour drive, 4.5-hour drive for us.
So since we are here celebrating Rare Disease Day for this genetics pop-up, what does Rare Disease Day mean to you and your family?
To me, really, Rare Disease Day is every day for me, because every day it is kind of my mission to raise awareness and make sure people are aware of the effects, that we have to access to care and just what PKU does, to a family or, to that specific individual. But it's incredible during Rare Disease Day, and in fact, like the entire month, the amount of people that are raising their voice for someone that they love or they know is personally affected by this disease, if not them themselves. So many people tell me that, they wish they could advocate more. They wish they had the voice or the energy or the time to commit to it. So to see people doing that for an entire month is super awesome. Advocacy, is what I do, and seeing people raise their voice the way they do just like lights that fire for me even more. And the rare disease community is incredible, and it's one I never really knew that I needed.
What are the biggest barriers to accessing genetics care and service that you and your family face, or that other families with PKU face?
We touched on it a little bit already. Access to care, there's not a lot of genetic or metabolic clinics around. You find them sort of within children's hospitals or, big medical communities. So we're not the only family that has to travel. Wyoming's not the only family affected by this. You have to travel to a big city essentially to receive the care that you need. And some of that care becomes virtual, especially since, the pandemic. But most barriers that I would say the metabolic community faces is just access to treatment. There's a slogan that's kind of been born through the formula crisis and the formula shortage that is still very much going on for the metabolic community. And that is supply is not access. So once supply is restored, that doesn't mean we have access to it. Like I said, metabolic patients and specifically we're talking PKU, rely on metabolic formula and low protein foods for life. There's no guaranteed coverage. In fact, there's just about zero coverage for the low protein medical foods. And your formula coverage could be swept out from underneath you at any point. Our plan specifically right now cuts off metabolic formula coverage at age 21, despite the fact that he needs this for life. The low protein medical foods, we can't buy a 99-cent bag, 99-cent box of pasta at the grocery store. We have to buy a $14 bag of pasta from Cambrook. So there's a huge financial burden associated with the foods and formulas. And when you have an insurance plan that doesn't provide coverage for those things, it puts a lot of strain on a family. And then those people end up lost to care because they simply cannot afford the one proven effective treatment for all patients living with PKU. So our biggest barrier is really access to metabolic formula and medical foods.
What is your one piece of advice for a family out there that may have recently received a genetics diagnosis, whether that be PKU or possibly another condition?
Yeah, to take it one day at a time. And you live and you learn. You weren't meant to be an expert in this. You never thought you would have to be, but you will become an expert and you'll become their biggest advocate and it'll become your greatest accomplishment, but it's not easy. You'll fall down a lot, but as long as you continue to learn from your mistakes, you'll be better for it. And you are one of their biggest advocates. So it's important to be the expert and know that that's normal.
What does hope mean to you in the realm of a genetic diagnosis?
Hope sometimes is all you really have to hold on to. But for me, a diagnosis means that research has been done and there's room to expand on that research and grow and hopefully find a cure or whatever it might be, treatments. I've seen so many come before me in the realm of PKU in research and advocacy, and the common factor is always just determination for the future of the community. And it's incredible. So, I mean, hope to me is simply just having a diagnosis, which means, someone is paying attention.
What else would you like to tell everyone that I haven't asked you? What other question would you like to answer, or what other piece of information you'd like to share?
I don't know. I mean, I'm very passionate about advocacy and other people, finding their voice in advocacy. Some people don't feel comfortable speaking about, their specific disorder that they're dealing with because they may feel too fortunate or more fortunate than someone else, that sharing their story doesn't seem appropriate because, they consider themselves lucky. But your story is still important and you still have something to contribute. So some of those people that have come to me and have said they just don't know how to get into advocacy is you just have to find what you're passionate about. Sometimes that's not the disorder itself, but it's newborn screening. Newborn screening is debated by a lot of people, and there's still people that are refusing newborn screening. So there is something somewhere that you could pour your heart into that would mean a lot to somebody someday. So I encourage everybody to be an advocate and just raise their voice for what they're passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you, Kayla.